Welcome to episode 2 of the WrestleMania review series. Today, surprise surprise, we're talking about WrestleMania 2.
I just love what I do.
After the resounding success of WrestleMania 1, Vince McMahon is now in a much more comfortable position, to the point where he can throw loads of money at this show, and if it's not a financial success, he's not in too bad of a position.
And that's a lot of cash.
Because WrestleMania 1 was great financially, and it really set the WWF up in the new direction that they wanted their brand to go in, and they also launched at the same time WrestleMania, so they thought, why not make another WrestleMania? Why don't we call it WrestleMania 2, but we're going to hold it in 3 locations.
Unbelievable.
Which is unprecedented for WWE pay-per-views to hold it at separate arenas. This show started off at the Nassau Coliseum in Uniondale, New York. Then it moved on to the Rosemont Horizon in Rosemont, Illinois, before finishing up at the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena in, of course, Los Angeles, California. It took place on April the 7th, 1986, and between all 3 venues, they packed in 40,085 people. Before we get into the show, I just want to make it clear that I used this copy of WWE Tagged Classics, the WrestleMania 2 version, and it is highly edited. A lot of stuff was missing from my version, but I'll do my best to recap what I saw on this bad boy right here. So my copy started off with a very quick intro, then straight into the first match, Don Muraco versus Paul Orndorff. On commentary is Vince McMahon and Susan St. James. Yeah, I don't know who that is either. This was a very quick match, and it ended in a double countout. The most interesting thing about this match is that Paul Orndorff main evented WrestleMania 1. He main evented the biggest show in the company's history up until this point, and now they put him in the first match with Don Muraco. I mean, why? Obviously they turned him face after WrestleMania 1, but it just feels like he lost all his momentum when that happened. Next up is a match that I vividly remember from my childhood, as Macho Man Randy Savage takes on George the Animal Steele. The story going into this one is that Macho Man isn't treating Liz very well, in storyline but also pretty much in reality as well. And George the Animal Steele is obsessed with Liz, and he really wants to free her from Savage's grip and then take her on board himself. Which is a bit of a silly storyline because she doesn't really want to leave Savage, she doesn't want to go off with Steele, so it's just kind of making a woman go with you against her own will, which, you know, isn't cool, is it? All credit to George the Animal Steele, though. He really portrayed his character perfectly, especially for the time where the gimmicks weren't as elaborate as they are maybe nowadays. He was absolutely perfect and bang on. And this match features the most memorable spot from this entire show from when I was a kid and I used to watch this. And I used to watch it on the VHS tapes. What happened was, George the Animal Steele, he just starts eating the turnbuckle, and there's all this foam going all over the place. And I don't know why, I just thought it was so wild. I remember crazily jumping around my house going Mom, Dad, watch this. George the Animal Steele is eating the turnbuckle. As if they were going to know who that was. To me, I thought he was a massive celebrity, but realistically, he was just another guy on the WWE roster at this point. The match was pretty decent. It told a good story of, you know, Macho Man being a little bit scared of George the Animal Steele because he's a little bit off the wall. Macho Man hits Steele with the elbow drop, and Steele kicks out, which again is kind of unheard of. And in the end, Savage has to cheat, feet on the ropes to get the win. But obviously, this is kind of the start of Savage really getting the rocket. And of course, this is his WrestleMania debut. After the match, what does George the Animal Steele do? Does he drown his sorrows? No, he goes back to eating another turnbuckle. Then we had Jake the Snake Roberts taking on George Wells. George Wells is someone who, to this day, I don't really know a lot about him. You don't really hear a lot about him. He kind of flies under the radar of old school WWF guys. But I've got to give him complete credit, because in this match, 1986, American Pro Wrestling, George Wells does a head scissor takedown on Jake the Snake, and it's absolutely brilliant. Unfortunately for Wells though, Jake hits the DDT and gets the win. This show to me is really when all the gimmicks are really starting to take off in the WWF, because after the match, Jake brings out the snake, and I was thinking wow, for this time, Jake getting the snake out is really revolutionary. And let's be honest, it's one of the most famous gimmicks of all time. If anyone in regular day-to-day life says Jake, a lot of the times people will say Jake the Snake. Even if it's completely unrelated to wrestling, just have a friend called Jake, people just be like, oh, you're right, Jake the Snake. They'll just say it. And that shows how great Jake was and how he really did transcend pro wrestling. Then we had the New York main event. as Mr. T, with Smoking Joe Frazier in his corner, took on Roddy Piper in a boxing match. Yes, you heard me right, it was a boxing match. And to be fair, if this was a real boxing match and all this stuff happened, it'd be one of the best, greatest boxing matches of all time. All the drama going in, all the cheating, so many talking points, but it wasn't real. And it came off looking very, very phony. Now, I don't like to use that word in relation to wrestling, and you never really will ever hear me say it, but when you bring up a real sport and you try and get wrestlers to do it, especially like boxing, it just didn't come off well at all. Obviously, the reason why they did this is because Mr. T is really limited in the ring. They tried to step it up from last time where he wrestled a little bit, but I mean, they couldn't really do it again in a one-on-one match, could they? The boxing match, after about 4 what felt like mega long rounds, ends with a bit of a schmoz. Piper slams Mr. T. I think T wins by disqualification, but I mean, it wasn't very good. By the way, if you're watching this right now and you are a proper old school wrestling fan, and you was alive and as a child, or maybe not a child, maybe an adult at the time, and you watched this show, what did you think of especially the Mr. T Piper segment? After that, we moved on to Chicago with Gorilla Monsoon, Mean Gene Okerlund and Kathy Lee on commentary. And we opened up with a women's title match as the fabulous Moolah took on Velvet McIntyre. This is another match that was ended really quickly. Another match that ends with someone's feet on the ropes, but this time it was the defeated Velvet McIntyre who had a foot on the ropes, so obviously she can come back and be like, hey Moolah, you might have beaten me, but I had my feet on the ropes. It should have never accounted. Moolah was playing a heel in this match as well, and she came across pretty horrible. A lot of stuff has come out in real life about what she used to do with women wrestlers and that kind of thing, so it's a little bit awkward, isn't it? Next up, we had a flag match as Corporal Kirschner took on Nikolai Volkoff with classy Freddie Blassie by his side. Now, I thought this match was going to be a capture the flag match, but it didn't turn out to be that at all. It was just a regular match with the flags on either side of the ring. Just there, and then the winner, it was Corporal Kirschner. He intercepts Freddie Blassie's cane as he tries to throw it to Nikolai Volkoff. He gets the cane, he nails Volkoff with it, he gets the win, and he just walks off with his American flag. It is a nice callback to WrestleMania 1 the year before, where Freddie Blassie throws his cane to Iron Sheik, who nails Barry Windham with it, and Sheik and Volkoff win the tag team titles. This time he tries to throw it to Volkoff, it gets intercepted, and Volkoff loses. Next up is probably my favourite match on the card, as we had a 20-man Battle Royal. And I get it, listen, Battle Royals on modern day WrestleManias are pretty dire, aren't they? But this one was completely different because he had 10 pro wrestlers and 10 American football players, and if I was an American kid at the time, and I was a fan of American football, I would have been going absolutely wild for this. They had a couple special guest referees for this, including the guy with the most unfortunate name in the history of the world, Dick Butkus. And one annoying thing was on the DVD, this is the first match that had entrances, which, come on, this is the worst match to have entrances because there's 20 different ones going on. Of course, in this match, you're getting Bret Hart's WrestleMania debut, and you're also getting Bruno Sammartino wrestling, which, why could you not have him last year? I was trying to get it last year. Why wouldn't you give him to us? The big name out of this match, though, that stuck with me all the way through these years is William the Refrigerator Perry. I don't know why, but his name always stuck with me all these years, and to me, he's a mega celebrity. I don't know how big he was in the NFL or what he achieved, but to me, I'll always remember him. And one thing that I picked up on this watch that I've never picked up on before is Russ Francis. Russ Francis was an NFL player, and on commentary, they talk about how he's wearing his dad's wrestling boots, and his dad used to be a wrestler. And I thought, wow, that's actually pretty cool that there's this NFL player and his dad used to be a wrestler and they put him in the match. Hey, and who knows, maybe one day we'll get Road Warrior Animal's son wrestling at WrestleMania. Watching this back as an adult, it was a bit slow, it was a bit plodding, but it ended very, very well in my opinion, with the last 4 being Russ Francis, the Hart Foundation, Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, and Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant ends up against both members of the Hart Foundation. First he eliminates Anvil and he's pulling him by his goatee, which I thought is a great spot. And then he gorilla press slams Bret Hart and throws him over the top rope onto Anvil. They go spilling all over the floor and Andre the Giant is the winner. And And that's why we now get the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. And then we had the British Bulldogs with Ozzy Osbourne and Captain Lou Albano by their side versus the Dream Team, the tag team champions Greg the Hammer Valentine and Brutus the Barber Beefcake. The first thing that jumped out to me about this match was how great Brutus the Barber Beefcake's tights were compared to everybody else. He seemed like he really was ahead of the game. Nowadays, everyone's got great tights, and I really think you can kind of chase it all the way back to people like Brutus Beefcake, who were kind of trendsetters. Because besides him, most people on this card were just plain trunks, plain boots, maybe had their initials on them somewhere, maybe their nickname, but that was about it. The British Bulldogs really had a believable style as well. They'd be really on you. If your opponent rolled out the ring, they'd just chase him out the ring straight away and roll him back in. Not like nowadays in pro wrestling. They use it as a stalling tactic. They use it as a pantomime tactic. Wrestler rolls out the ring. Good guy in the ring, he's like, oh, what's going on? And then like the guy outside is like, no, I'm not coming back inside. But when these guys were rolling out, Dynamite just rolled straight out after them, grabbed them and threw them straight back in the ring, which legitimately, that's what you would do in a fight. If you're on top and you're about to win, you're not just going to let them roll out and have a bit of a breather, are you? British Bulldogs in this one get the win. It felt like a bit of an underdog win, excuse the pun, which meant Captain Lou Albano was once again managing the tag team champions. This guy can't stay away from them, can he? Then we move on to the LA Coliseum as Elvira, Lord Alfred Hayes and Jesse the Body Ventura are on commentary. The first match in LA featured Hercules Hernandez taking on Ricky Steamboat. Now this match really didn't have much to talk about, and Ricky Steamboat ended up getting the win, but I mean, woof, can't really tell you much about it. Steamboat, 2 stinkers in a row for my money. Then we had Adrian Adonis taking on Uncle Elmer. Now Uncle Elmer, I can't really tell you much positive stuff about him. He was a huge overweight guy, didn't move that well in the ring, wasn't really believable looking, but oh my goodness, Adrian Adonis, talk about ahead of your time. Adrian Adonis was wearing a dress, acting very flamboyantly, getting so much heat for something as simple as that. Then Adrian, for a larger set guy as well, was absolutely selling like a salesman. Either way, he was selling a lot and he was selling very well. And when the final bell rings, Adrian Adonis has got his hand lifted in victory, and to be completely honest, he deserved it. He was the superior performer in this match. Then in the semi-main event, we had Terry and Dory Funk Jr. taking on Tito Santana and the Junkyard Dog in a really bizarre match. Now this match was bizarre for a lot of reasons. One, because Tito Santana and the Junkyard Dog felt like they were kind of just pushed together just for the sake of it. Two, the Funk Brothers are real NWA stalwarts, so seeing them in the WWF at this point is really interesting. And three, to talk about the tights one more time, it was really interesting seeing the Junkyard Dog wearing the exact same tights as he wore 1 year before WrestleMania. Now you might be thinking, why is that interesting? Why is it interesting that he's wearing the same tights 2 years in a row? It's the big show. Surely he's going to wear his best tights 2 years in a row. Well, nowadays, the wrestlers, they barely wear the same gear twice, especially if they've worn it on a big show. What they'll do is, they'll sell it to a fan for tons and tons of money. And especially considering that Junkyard Dog wore this at WrestleMania 1, those tights would be worth so much money. It's just unimaginable. But the fact is, he kept on wearing them because at the time, the value wasn't there. People didn't see the value in it. In terms of the match, it was nothing to write home about. The Funks ended up getting the win after they used Jimmy Hart's megaphone illegally. And then in the main event of the evening, Hulk Hogan defended the WWF World Heavyweight Championship title belt against Monster Challenger King Kong Bundy. Now this is the first ever WWF heavyweight title defense at WrestleMania. King Kong Bundy is coming off a quick squash match at WrestleMania 1. They've turned him into this great heel that can challenge Hogan and really put him under threat. Oh, and it's in a steel cage. Bundy is the classic story of build a monster, feed him to the good guy so the good guy can destroy him and go over strong. Hogan lets Bundy dominate him in this match before coming back with that good guy surge. Even after feeling the effects of 2 avalanches from King Kong Bundy, the second one, Hogan, no. He's firing up. Hogan ends up getting the win when he climbs up the cage, climbs over and beats King Kong Bundy, who's crawling out of the door. The fans are sent home happy, but was I happy with it? How do I score this event? This is a pretty lackluster card. I think the fact that they held it at 3 separate arenas really killed it. There didn't really seem to be that continuity with an event. It didn't really grow in vibe. The way you had main events scattered through the show, the pacing just wasn't really there. How it works in the arenas is you would see your segment and then you would see on video the rest of the show. So for example, if it started off in New York, they would have seen their segment and then seen the rest of the show. In Chicago, they would have seen a bit, got their live bit and then seen a bit. And then in Los Angeles, they would have seen the 2 segments and then seen their bit to end the show live. As a viewer watching it all these years later, the only real thing that I would say go back and watch is the Adrian Adonis Uncle Elmer match, because Adonis was selling so well. Yeah, like a salesman, right? If I'm giving this show a score out of 10, I'm probably going for 4 out of 10. If I'm going on the recommendation scale of how I'd recommend this to my nephews, saying should you watch it or not, I would probably recommend it at about a 2 or a 3, to be honest with you. This to me is a show that you don't really need to go back and watch unless you love wrestling history, unless you're really into it and you've never seen it before, then go watch it. But if you're just a regular fan, nah, I'm not feeling it. In terms of fantasy booking then, what would I change? Well, the glaring thing straight away to me is the 2 tag team matches. I maybe would have switched it out and had the Funk Brothers somehow win the tag team titles along the way and then take on the British Bulldogs, or have the British Bulldogs win it elsewhere and then take on the challenging Funk Brothers. I think that would have been a much better match. And then that leaves you with Tito Santana and the Junkyard Dog, 2 people who had beef with Greg Valentine at WrestleMania earlier. They both could have faced off against Valentine and Beefcake. I may have even switched Jake the Snake Roberts to go against Paul Orndorff, because Paul Orndorff was a bigger star, had a bigger name, and if Jake the Snake would have beaten him, it would have done a lot more for him. But yeah, what did you guys think of WrestleMania 2? What do you guys think of my fantasy booking changing up very slightly? And what did you think of this video? Hit me up in the comment section down below. Thank you very much for watching. Be sure, if you haven't already, to hit the subscribe button down below. Ding the notification bell. That way, you will get notified when I drop my next wrestling video, which will obviously be WrestleMania 3 Hulk versus Andre.